We are back on the mat. Final segment, segment 3. I'm Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Dan Gable Museum, and I'm joined by someone who knows the power of love, and that's Doug Van Gelder. And I'll tell you, the power of love is going to have a pot roast waiting for you at home when you get off the radio show here.
Pot roast?
Is that what it is? Yeah, pot roast carrots. It's going to be good. We're going to end in...
Steaming all day.
Yeah.
Delicious.
We are going to end in style. We have Matt Granahan, co-author of The History of American Submission Wrestling. We had on Erik Paulson. We have Matt Granahan on for our final segment. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. It's a rough and tumble afternoon here in Columbia, South Carolina.
I know. What do you think? Do you think you could take Gable even today?
I doubt it, man.
You don't think so? Yeah, I don't either.
I doubt it, man.
I don't either.
It's not in this sweltering heat. What's the temperature like in
What did we
Iowa?
get? 83 was the...
Yeah, it's pretty cool here today.
That's not too bad.
It's a cool 115 degrees here in central South Carolina.
Holy cow! Well, give us an idea. You of course have a passion for submission wrestling and wrestling in general. What was the idea behind this book?
Well, the book kind of came about due to a school that I was training at in North Carolina. An old-time catch wrestler, Billy Wicks, had started, and it's called Western Carolina Combat Club. I had done wrestling, freestyle, and judo prior to that, and I never even heard of catch wrestling. I didn't even know what it was. And then about 5 years ago, I first went to that school and found out that the media, the news media, and the sports media, the MMA media, never really mentions catch wrestling. And I think when you open up the book, when you open up Rough and Tumble, and you read the foreword by Gene LaBelle and then the foreword by Billy Wicks, it kind of tells you the reason why Eric and I wanted to do this book is because a lot of these holds that are used in submission wrestling and in mixed martial arts, like a double wrist lock, for example, they've been around for quite a number of years, and they predate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you rarely ever hear the name like a double wrist lock used, to describe these holds when you listen to guys like Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg. They're great commentators, but you rarely ever hear the wrestling names for these holds. And I've always been fascinated by all this history. I first started figuring out what catch wrestling was and submission wrestling was, and it's a fascinating history, and I think a lot of fighters are going to find it fascinating. I think a lot of guys that aren't fighters and even aren't wrestlers are going to find this history fascinating, because it's really a cool American history.
Well, your background, give us an idea on how you got involved in wrestling.
I started wrestling in 8th grade, in middle school, and then in high school, and then in college, I did freestyle, and joined a freestyle wrestling club, and also did judo. And I started to gravitate kind of away from wrestling after college, and more into judo, and kind of got back into wrestling with the Western Carolina Combat Club, and also trained at another school I trained at in Virginia, the Richmond area, that had a wrestling, submission wrestling, kind of wrestling for mixed martial arts based. And then I started getting into competing in the submission wrestling and in the MMA a little bit, and I kind of found that the submission wrestling kind of goes hand in hand, with that.
Now, with mixed martial arts as popular as it is, and this is the question that is really prominent in college wrestling right now, is how is mixed martial arts going to continue to affect college wrestling? Do you see it being a positive effect? Do you think this is really going to give college wrestling a way to get out and have a profession, or do you think it's ultimately going to hurt it?
I think it's ultimately going to help it. And collegiate wrestling and also international wrestling, I feel feel strongly that, I mean, even if you just look at who's at the top rung of mixed martial arts, and it's the wrestlers. I do a business with a guy who wrestled for Iran in the national team and went on to the Olympics for Great Britain, Kamal Shahrooz, and he's telling me that in Iran, we were on another radio show, he and I, about an upcoming seminar we got going in Maryland, and they were asking us about kind of a similar question about wrestling and mixed martial arts. And what he was saying is that in Iran and Russia, more of the wrestlers are starting to really get into MMA, and it's kind of like a feeder program. And I think what's going to end up happening is the wrestlers have been so dominant in MMA that I think you're going to start to kind of see feeder programs where college teams are gonna start feeding guys into submission wrestling and MMA camps.
So do you see with the evolution, do you see kids at age 10, 11, 12 who haven't gone out for sports, watching submission wrestling, watching mixed martial arts, saying, I want to be that way, I'm going to get into wrestling as my start?
I think if they really are smart and have some direction, that's really what they're going to do. Because if you look at it, the guys that are the most successful had a wrestling base, and they had to learn how to wrestle. So they had to start in amateur wrestling. I think that there's another side of that coin too, is that with MMA being as popular as it is, a lot of these kids, when you're 10, 11 years old, you want to be Superman. So a lot of these kids, they may want to just be MMA fighters, and they may not want to put in the time to go through wrestling programs and learn how to wrestle. So I think it's a double-sided coin. I think that the kids, it's going to be on an individual program basis. I think the kids are going to need some direction, and that direction is going to have to come through promotion of the wrestling programs and also the child's upbringing.
We ask Eric this, and I'm interested in your take. Do you see mixed martial arts topping off at some point and going into the lull that boxing is going through right now?
I don't see it happening anytime soon, because there's still room for expansion. And when I say that, I train guys down here in South Carolina. We had a club for grappling, and when MMA became illegal last year in South Carolina, our guys started competing in the mixed martial arts. But that's an example of it, because in South Carolina, up until a little over a year ago, there was no MMA. It hadn't been legalized. And there's still a lot of states, like Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York, a big one, up in the northeastern United States, where MMA is not legal yet. So I think that, like anything else, it's gonna hit a peak and it's gonna kind of level off. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think there's a large room for growth right now, especially given the fact that there's a lot of states that still haven't sanctioned it.
What kind of money is in that program out there? I mean, is there still going to be enough money going into this kind of capital? I mean, what can a kid expect to earn when he comes into MMA?
Well, that's a great question, because there's not a lot of money in it, and I don't want to talk, dollars with people as examples, but there's guys that fight for WEC, which is a major promotion owned by UFC, owned by Zuffa, that are on contracts like 335 or 355, where they'll make $3,000 their first fight, $3,000 their second fight. So a lot of the money comes through endorsements, and through getting sponsors and sponsorships. There's a lot of small-time MMA shows. Some are pro-am shows, some are all-pro shows, some are amateur shows that draw a crowd that could be substantial, could be tiny. I mean, if you go on like mixedmartialarts.com, any given weekend, there's going to be shows all over the United States, in states where it's sanctioned. Just to give you one example, when MMA became legal in South Carolina, my company was involved in the first show and putting on the first show in South Carolina, and we met with the ISKA, and they told us that Tennessee, one of the neighboring states to us, had done over 450 MMA shows in 2008. Which, I mean, that's pretty amazing. You know, that many shows just in Tennessee. So there's a lot of shows, there's a lot of places for kids to compete, but the money, it's not really there. I mean, you see a lot of guys in UFC or WEC that may have contracts that still have to work another job. You know, the main thing comes in sponsor money, and it's kind of like any other sport. You know, there's a lot of pro out there, but the money in that pro can be, you know, I hate to say it, but can be piss poor, you know, at the very bottom.
Go ahead, Doug. I can say that's sort of like pro golf. I mean, a lot of those kids that start out in the golfing, they have to have sponsors. So it's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, and the sponsors is an interesting thing because you know, a lot of the fighters will make more money on their sponsorships than they will on their fights.
Sure. Now, do you see this ultimately? Is this going to hurt international wrestling for freestyle and Greco?
I don't think so, because I honestly don't think that every wrestler is going to get into the cage fighting or into the mixed martial arts. I have a feeling, I mean, I think it's going to be I wouldn't want to attach a percentage to it, but I would think it's going to be a fairly low percentage of guys that want to cross over. But saying that, I still think there's a lot of room for growth with collegiate wrestlers and with international wrestlers to cross over.
All right, we got to end this segment, but I want you to chime in on this. We have the legend Randy Couture going against James Toney in a couple weeks. This is one that should interest a lot of boxing and wrestling fans. What is your prediction with this fight?
I don't think that Toney is going to last a minute.
You don't?
No, I think he's going to get taken down and quite possibly submitted in the first minute. Randy Couture is training under a guy named Neil Melanson, who is a friend of mine, and Kamal, my business partner, is actually out there now in Vegas training with those guys, with Neil and with Randy, and I think that the smack that James Toney has been talking leading up to this fight, I don't think he's going to be able to show his face in public after this fight.
So you don't think he has a puncher's chance, huh?
Everybody's always got a puncher's chance, but if I was gonna, you know, if somebody was gonna put a gun to my head and tell me to bet my house on it, I would say Randy Couture would win in the first round. I don't think Toney will make it out of the first round.
All right. Well, I think that probably a good prediction there. Doug said it won't go out of the first round no matter who wins, and I think that's probably the best bet you can have. So we want to say thanks for coming on the program today. It was fun having you on and enlightening us about the world of mixed martial arts and submission wrestling, and we wish you all the best.
Great. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, guys.
All right, Matt. Matt Granahan. We've had Erik Paulson, and Doug, I know that you can attest to what wrestling has done for your confidence.
Buy the book at erikpaulson.com.